Last topic for this exam and for this series, but by no means the least, particularly for the people who probably pay your salary. Being able to recover data that they should accidentally lose, or heaven forbid you should actually lose, is arguably one of the most important reasons why you as an IT professional exist. Leaving this topic for last just so that we all end out on a big bang with a cool thing that we can do. Being able to recover data is something that definitely proves our worth as IT professionals. Here in this nugget, we are going to explore relatively quickly, honestly, some of the ways in which you can go about recovering servers. And I say quickly because that process has gotten quite a bit better than it used to be in the old days. Back in the old days, before some of these newer technologies, recovering servers, not just the data, but entire servers via things like bare metal restore was just a nightmarish process. Having to go and lay down another operating system and then install your operating system over that one and hope that everything works correctly is just not really a good way to do server restoration. So the abilities to do bare metal restores, the abilities to bring servers back to life that were for some reason gone, is a great technology, is a great thing that you can provide in that case where, for some reason data should suddenly get disappeared. We'll also talk very quickly about restoring things from backups, and I'll show you the Windows Server Backup tool that we have. I've already completed a backup using Windows Server Backup so that we can take a look at it here in this nugget. I also want to show you just a long list of commands and tools that you have available to you, both in WinRE and in safe mode for recovering servers. Just be aware of what these commands are and what they're useful for, because you can get tested on it, and when servers have problems, it's just a good idea to know what those commands are, because when you've got people breathing down your neck, you want to know where to go for all the tools that you need to have available. And then also how to configure the boot configuration data store. Back in previous versions, there was a tool called BCD Edit to accomplish this, which was a neat way in which you could not only do recovery, but also adjust just the different ways you could do multi-boot if you have multiple different operating systems on the same machine. Well, that was a kind of a tough command to use. And so in this version, there's now a new tool called BCD Boot, which kind of simplifies the process. And I'll show you what both of these commands look like here in this nugget. So here we are back on our machine, file 1, and I'm going to use this machine as the example for how we can go through the variety of different ways that we would restore data that we've previously backed up. Obviously, I can come here to Windows Server Backup and see the backup that I kicked off between that last nugget and this one, where we can see I have a single backup that has completed here just really honestly a few minutes ago, and that backup has been successful. If you want to recover based off of that backup, and you're just talking about an individual file or folder, well, the easy way to do that is just to click the recover link here, because the server is up and operational. Locate the server, find whatever the backup is. Here's the backup that occurred at 224. It's on the F drive. And then what kind of recovery do I want? Files, folders, applications that incorporating with VSS, system state, an entire volume. If I'm looking to just restore an individual file or folder, I can accomplish that here by just figuring out which file or folder I need to restore. So there's not really much in the way of just exciting things to offer here when I'm talking about files and folders. This is just your basic restoration process. Am I going to restore data when I put it to the same location or another location, or what do I want to do? What do I want to do with it? Where things start to get a little bit more exciting is when we're talking about not restoring individual files and folders, but actually entire servers, or bringing servers back to life after they've experienced some sort of failure. Now, if you played with Windows for any period of time, you're aware that the one way in which we can get ourselves to that advanced boot options screen is by rebooting the server and then hitting F8 about 18,000 times in the hopes that we'll actually get to that advanced boot options screen. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I'm here to tell you that there are a variety of other ways in which you can accomplish that as well that don't require furiously hitting one of the function keys at the top of your keyboard while we wait for this machine to reboot. I want to show you a couple of them just so that you're aware. Number one is just simply booting from the Windows DVD. If you boot from that Windows DVD, there'll be a little option on the screen that says repair this server, and that will take you into the repair options that exist. Another mechanism that you may use is here under MS Config. And so when it comes time to do msconfig, I can change the boot options here and drop myself into one of the safe boot options if I want. So the minimal shell, the alternate shell, the minimal shell with network, or the safe boot with network option. These are available for me if I want to get myself into the safe mode option the next time I power on this machine. I can also set some advanced options here for how I want to set up these boot options. This more has to do with whenever I'm configuring multi-boot really than when I'm trying to get into Windows RE. Another option that you may or may not have been aware of is using the BCDEdit tool itself. Now, BCDEdit, if I just view it all by itself, will tell me the boot configuration, just the selections that have been set up for boot configuration. And there are a variety of ways in which I can grab GUIDs that are associated with installations and set them up for which order they get booted in and how many seconds of a timeout countdown exist and all that sort of magic. But I don't want to show you too much about BCDEdit other than the BCDEdit let's see here, set safe boot minimal command, which will instruct the machine at the next boot to boot into safe mode. That'll be the regular safe mode. I can do safe mode with networking if I wanted. I can do the safe mode with command prompt if I do safe boot alternate shell. Now, using BCDEdit as the mechanism to force myself into safe mode is great, but it's also kind of not so great, because in order to undo that, I have to come back here to BCDEdit and then choose delete value, and then safe boots to get myself back into normal operations. So you may find that this is just one, even though you can use BCDEdit as a way to do this, it may not be the best solution for BCDEdit. Again, BCDEdit was originally invented or designed as the tool to help you with those multi-boot selections, so I can boot into Windows, one version, or boot into a different version of Windows, or even Linux if you wanted to. Replacing BCDEdit is a new tool called BCDBoot, which allows you to adjust your system partitions, create new system BCD stores if you want. So a little bit easier for us in terms of dealing with booting, for creating new boot configuration files. But this BCDBoot tool I would be aware of, because again, it's one of those things, it just seems like it's a great test question because it is one of the newer tools that are out there. The one tool that honestly, I will freely admit I did not know existed until I was sort of, poking around for prepping for this nugget, is a new one called Shutdown. It's not even a new one, it's just new to me. /r/o/t_0. Now, I've been using the /r/t_0 for a long time as my little personal shortcut for getting a machine to reboot. A little faster for me to create a command prompt and then type that in than it is to try to locate where the reboot command actually is now here on Windows Server 2012. But it's the /o that I wasn't aware of. This is an awesome little tool, and in fact I will probably find myself using it quite a bit more now that I'm aware that it exists. The /o parameter, when you run it with shutdown, it's going to, apparently it's now going to install my updates, but it is going to restart the machine not as in regular mode, but instead directly into Windows RE, the Windows Recovery Environment. So I love this because if I need to make some changes or get Windows RE up and operational, I can use that /o to get here really quickly. Now, one of the great reasons why this exists is because if I need to do a complete restoration of a machine, one of the ways I can accomplish that is by doing a system image recovery. Now remember, in order to do a bare metal recovery, I have to have the system state, I have to have the bare metal stuff, I have to have the system reserved partition, and I have to have the C drive, the system partition itself. If I do have all those pieces that are either on the server or are in a location that I can use to perhaps find over the network, well then I can use the system image recovery as a mechanism to bring this server back to life by just pointing to that backup that I created. I'm rebooting the machine now, and I'm booting it back up into Windows RE so I can do this system image recovery. I need to log in as the local administrator for the machine, and it's going to scan this machine for any available system image that exists. I can either use the latest one or I can select one if there are multiple ones that are available. I only have one here, so I'll just choose the latest one that exists. And if there's not one available, then I would have the option here to go to some other location in order to find that system image. If I choose to use it, I can install disk drivers if those are necessary to get this machine back online. A couple of advanced options here for restarting or checking and updating disk error information. But really, that's all that's necessary if I want to take a machine and revert it to a previous point in time. If you ever had to do a system restore back in the oldest of days, you were probably thinking, oh my God, this is really awesome because this is so much easier than the multi-step process that we used to have for taking servers and making them actually usable servers once again. Now, if I'm just looking to get myself into the advanced boot options screen, there is a way to do that. Again, I don't have to worry about the hidden F8 over and over again. If I go to troubleshoot and then startup settings and then restart, I can then restart this machine now so that you will see it show up here with the list of advanced boot options. These options are something that I would be pretty familiar with if I were taking this exam, because these options have specific reasons for being. Now let's run through them, kind of all of these and the reason why they exist. The first of which being safe mode. Now safe mode is a mechanism or a mode of operations for Windows that loads only a minimal set of drivers, a minimal set of services for like the mouse, for keyboard, for storage, for video. If you have some kind of situation where an application or a service is causing this machine to behave poorly, well, safe mode or safe mode with networking, or even a much more stripped down version of safe mode, which is just the command prompt itself without any of the video, any of the GUI stuff, or any of the networking stuff. This can actually help get the server back online by perhaps disabling the service or removing an application or any of those things that could be causing the server to misbehave. Now, when safe mode doesn't work, you have a variety of other options as well. Well, the one that's really useful here, if you end up making a change or adding a driver or something that just completely tears up the machine, the last known good configuration, the LKGC, is something that can occasionally bring your server back to life, but you can only use it in one and only one circumstance. You have to do this after the problem occurs and before you end up having a successful boot after the problem occurs. The reason for this is that the last known good configuration identifies the last known good configuration once a machine has a successful boot. So if you end up where a driver install just keeps blue screening the machine, the last known good configuration can take you to the point before that driver gets installed. But if for some reason you end up getting a successful boot, well, sometimes you'll find that the LKGC is not actually taking you back far enough, because it's determined that the last known good configuration is probably happened after the installation of the driver. So be careful here and do it as immediately as possible after you make a change and see that that change ends up creating a problem. Debugging mode, really, unless you're doing some pretty heavy-duty kernel debugging, you're probably not going to find yourself working with that too often. The number of people on this planet that know how to do kernel debugging, I think I can count on one or two hands, perhaps. Doing effective kernel debugging requires a set of skills that is just amazing to watch happen, and you just don't see it happen that often. If you find yourself with a system that just keeps cycle rebooting, that happens from time to time, you can disable the automatic restart so that you can get a machine so you can actually see the blue screen. Sometimes if you're finding that you end up just this endless loop, I want to be able to actually see why I'm going through this endless loop, so don't actually automatically restart whenever the problem occurs. This one down here is one of those that again seems like a great test question. It's driver signature enforcement. By default, Windows Server 2012 will not load a kernel mode driver that has not been digitally signed. And that's for a good reason, right? You want a driver to be authenticated by some certificate that you trust. The problem is that sometimes, every so often, you might end up with a driver that driver has, for one reason or another, not actually been signed by its vendor. In that case, your organization may actually need to disable signature enforcement just to get the driver installed. This is a very, very edge use case in that rare circumstance where for some reason your vendor has not provided you a signed driver. But it happens. I've actually had it happen a couple of times back in within the last couple of years where that's been the case. In those cases, choose driver signature enforcement to disable it, allow your software to load or perhaps install the driver, and then move back into regular operations mode. The last one down here is the early launch anti-malware driver, which has everything to do with a type of malware that got really big and proliferated for a short period of time there a few years ago called rootkits. Rootkits are kind of, in fact, if you've never experienced a rootkit, rootkits are kind of wild because the rootkit is, let's see, so if this is you, and if this is a piece of data on disk, well, you have to talk to some API, say, hey, I'm looking for a file or folder, and the API then has to talk to the Windows Disk API to say, hey, do you have that file or folder? And the Disk API talks back to the Windows API, which talks to you. Well, a rootkit is a nifty little piece of code that actually patches this Windows API in some way to say, hey, if you're looking for a file on disk, actually redirect to a completely different disk API, a bad disk API, very bad, with its nefarious bad disk API mask and its black hat. Whenever you redirect to that location, the bad disk responds back telling you, oh yeah, no, that file or folder doesn't actually exist. So a rootkit can operate almost at a layer below the operating system. The early launch anti-malware driver is something that Microsoft incorporated in later versions of Windows to do a scan prior to the installation of Windows so that you're completing that scan outside of the perspective of Windows and in order to find these bad little rootkit drivers or bad little rootkit patches. You don't see as much about rootkits as you did a number of years ago when we had a big, like I said, a big proliferation of them, but there for a while we saw quite a few of them. And the last thing I want to show you here is just a couple of additional command prompt tools, if I can get this thing loaded back into repair your computer mode. There are a couple of command line tools that come in handy when it comes time to try to figure out why a machine isn't behaving appropriately. In cases, for example, that your registry has gotten corrupted, there's a tool called startrep. Startrep will perform an automatic startup repair for the registry. There's also a tool called bootrec. Bootrec is a tool that's useful for performing some basic repairs of the boot sector. And I already talked about BCDedit too, but those are the two I want to mention. If I open up the command prompt here and punch in my password, I should get access to run either the startrep or the bootrec command. Now, the startrep command actually is in, I think it's in sources, and then startrep. Just double check. Actually, where is it? DNR startrep star.star/s. It is in sources recovery. So cd sources recovery startrep right there. That will actually start, and as you can see here, even with the /command line switch, that will actually start a registry scan, diagnosis, and recovery. As you can see here, sometimes the commands don't work. Startup repair could not repair your PC. So, use these with a grain of salt because sometimes they may not actually work for you. The other command is bootrec, B-O-T-R-E-C. Bootrec is a tool that you can use to sort of fix some of the disk structures, the master boot record, the MBR, the boot configuration data store, the BCD store. I would be aware of Bootrec's fix MBR, fix boot, and scan OS, and also the rebuild BCD. All four of these, really, these different parameters anytime you're trying to recover any disk-based problems with a Windows operating system. So, gosh, not that much. Back in the old days, recovering operating systems was a lot more of a pain in the neck and a lot worse of a process to have to go through. But with the right backup and recovery technologies, the whole process of recovering servers gets a whole lot easier these days, and thank goodness for that. And what have we talked about in this nugget? We have talked about the process of recovering servers, recovering data from backups, recovering entire servers via bare metal restore, getting ourselves into WinRE via the multitude of different ways in which WinRE can be brought into, including just booting from a DVD if we need to. And then also a couple of ways in which we can configure the BCD store, even a couple of additional commands here that I think you should be aware of. With this, that takes us through the conclusion of this 22 nugget series on the 70-412 exam. And, you know, we've gone through a lot of different topics here. I have to admit that in all the different Microsoft exams that are out there, this is just one of them that seems to be the most out of left field in terms of a bunch of different technologies that don't necessarily link together. Your test-taking process, your steps in succeeding in this exam is just as you've already gone through here, understanding exactly which objectives are out there, knowing what the objectives refer to, having a good feel for the associated PowerShell commandlets, even for the ones that perhaps I didn't show you, and then just being aware of the steps and exactly what is being required for you for each of these objective domains. We had an opportunity here in this series to go through all, 20, 21 of the objective domains. And so hopefully this gives you the material that's necessary to give you the best chance of success in that upcoming 70-412 exam and the completion of at least this phase in your certification process. As always, my name is Greg Shields. These are always a joy to put together for you. When working with CPT Nuggets now for, almost 10 years, and putting together these series and having the opportunity to help you in your learning, help you with your career, and make you a better IT professional is one of the things that gets me up in the morning. Once again, my name is Greg Shields. Thank you again for this opportunity. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.